Good morning and welcome everyone to the October 12th California Broadband Council meeting. I am Leanna Bailey Crimmins, the Director of the Department of Technology, and also have the honor of chairing the Broadband Council. The October Council meeting is the last meeting of the year, and there have been significant progress on all of the state initiatives. Today, we'll be focusing on the action plan and the long-term actions, meaning those action items that will take more than a few years to complete. There has been a great deal of progress, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it. Mr. Prisbella, our first order of action is to please call the roll.
Absolutely. Director Bailey Crimmins.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Hauk.
Here.
Deputy Director Green.
Here.
Director Winkler.
Here.
Deputy Director Jameson.
Present.
Deputy Secretary Pepper.
Here.
Mrs. McPeak.
Here.
Deputy Secretary Flores.
Here.
California State Librarian Chisholm. Secretary Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Agallo.
Here.
Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Prisbella. Is any of the council members or committee members wish to speak before we start our official agenda? I see none. So the first order of business is to go ahead and do our agenda item, state broadband and digital literacy update from Scott Adams.
Thank you, Director Bailey Crimmins, and good morning, council members and members of the public. My name is Scott Adams, and I'm the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on our work today. Next slide, please. So as part of our report, I wanted to share that the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy continues to implement the action plan, work plan that was presented to the council at the beginning of the year. Since our last meeting, we report that we have continued to monitor and coordinate state broadband for all efforts, have conducted significant partner and stakeholder engagement meetings, consultations, and monthly email updates through the portal, in addition to conducting monthly action plan working sessions with action item owners. And lastly, we continue to work with Broadband Council partners and member agencies to leverage federal infrastructure investment and Jobs Act broadband programs to support broadband for all. Next slide. So we wanted to take an opportunity to recap that Broadband for All is the state's overarching program to close the digital divide throughout the state. And this is actually a living and breathing effort, and thought that this graphic would help demonstrate the evolution of Broadband for All. It begins with the historic work of the council. It was advanced by the governor's executive order, further outlined in the Broadband Action Plan, and then really given shape and structure through the historic Senate Bill 156 and the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative and the Last Mile programs. And now this year it has expanded to leverage many of the programs in the IIJA, including the Affordable Connectivity Plan, the Digital Equity Act programs, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the Enabling Middle Mile Infrastructure Program, the Travel Broadband Connectivity Program, and the USDA Reconnect Program. Next slide. As our work has expanded, so has our team, and we would like to welcome a new member to the Department of Technology team. It's our pleasure to welcome Ann Nguyen, who is our new Broadband Engagement and Operations Manager. Ann, could you please turn on your camera and say hello?
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Ann. Additionally, as we leverage the IIJA programs, many of which are administered by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which includes the digital equity and BEAD programs, Broadband for All is truly a federal and state and local partnership. And so to support and align federal and state efforts, we would like to welcome the NTIA's California team, who will be working closely with California on the development and implementation of the digital equity and BEAD plans. Please welcome some very familiar faces in these new critical roles. Susan Walters, could the NTIA team please turn on their cameras, and Susan, would you introduce them?
Good morning. It's great to be with you. I see I have a different name on screen, but Gladys Papalata is also here. And she is one of, there we go. And she is one of two state leads for California. Marina McClatchy, you can see, is also here. Obviously, both Gladys and Marina very deeply involved with myself with broadband in California. And we're all thrilled to be able to support California through the NTIA team. And we have two other people to introduce to you. They are supporting the tribal nations. And I see Andrew Orozco is here. Great, welcome. And many of you may know him as well, but if not, you'll have a chance to meet him soon. So Vanessa, I don't see as the other person supporting tribal nations. So thank you, Scott. I know you, there's Vanessa Cressy right there. So she can wave to you as well. So Scott, I know you've got a packed agenda. You can take it back. Know that, again, we're happy to be here and really work with you to implement the BEAD and digital equity programs. California has a lot going for it. Everybody's done some excellent work so far, and we expect everybody to take it over the finish line with flying colors. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Susan and NTIA team. We really look forward to our growing and evolving partnership and working together over the next year and the next 5 years. Okay, and that concludes our broadband office update. Back to you, Director Crimmins.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I'd also like to extend a big welcome to our new team member on WIN. It is always wonderful to have a new member of the CDT family to help the broadband effort. And then also welcome the NTI California team. We can only do this with your support. So Susan Walters and team, welcome, and we look forward to working closely with you. So with that, I'd like to open it up to the council members if anyone has any questions or comments you'd like to make before we go to the next agenda item. I see none, so we'll go ahead and go to the next agenda item, which is the Broadband for All in the year. So there are 4 categories in this. And so we're going to first start off with Mr. Adams again to give an update on what's going on with the broadband and digital literacy effort.
Thanks again, Director Bailey Crimmins and council members. Next slide, please. So I am here to report on the Broadband for All Action Plan implementation, and very pleased to report that collectively the Broadband Council members and state agencies have made great progress on action plan implementation. As reported out at previous meetings this year, the action plan was revised and updated as directed by the action plan at the end of last year, and we reported out in March of this year. As we reported in May, great progress has been made on short-term action items. Most of those are complete or will be complete by the end of the year. Many of those will continue to be monitored and refreshed on an annual basis. Similarly, as we reported out, significant progress has been made on long-term action items, many of which have external dependencies and that we will continue to monitor. CPUC is leading many of those and will provide updates on an ongoing basis. And lastly, as I mentioned, at the top of the meeting here, we throughout the year have monitored and identified ways to leverage the IIJA broadband programs to support broadband for all. Next slide, please. On this slide, we just wanted to highlight and provide a little more detail on some of the tremendous progress that's been made. On action item 5, CalSTA has done great work in enhancing permitting project processes and encroachment and right-of-way management. The Department of Technology has made great progress with members of this council on enhancing permitting efforts at all levels of government. And we've leveraged contracting and procurement vehicles to support the Middle Mile Initiative per action item number 9. On action item 15, we really wanted to give a shout out to the Department of Aging for developing 3 programs to meet the needs of seniors as directed by the action plan. On action items 16, 18, and 21, there's really collective progress that is made between council members and partners, done very significant work to promote low-cost offers and also to promote in-track enrollment in the Affordable Connectivity Program. Collectively, we've continued to develop and manage a very sizable multi-layer network of digital inclusion stakeholders and align, share resources, and coordinate initiatives. We have also worked together to launch and expand the Broadband for All portal, which part of the action plan was to develop a central repository of information for broadband in the state of California. And then lastly, on action item 24, CET had conducted basically a survey, an initial survey of state agencies and entities on their integration of broadband in their strategic plans. We will provide a summary of that at the first council meeting next year, and that will be a process that is ongoing over the next 5 years. Next slide. Our next steps are really going to be twofold. We're going to build on existing initiatives and gear up for state digital equity planning and BEAD planning, process and coordination. And part of that is to really leverage the work that's been done, to implement the broadband action plan and fold those into or use those to support the development of the digital equity and BEAD plans. Conversely, there is going to be significant engagement with numerous partners and stakeholders over the next year, and we intend to leverage those engagements to further support the development and completion of various action plan items. Next slide. We do want to flag that we are very appreciative of our partners in the legislature and their support in evolving Broadband for All. Wanted to highlight 4 very significant pieces of legislation that passed and were signed by the governor. We are currently analyzing how these will inform and perhaps revise change responsibilities of action items and further inform Broadband for All. And wanted to extend an invitation to the council members here that both the Department of Technology's legislative team and the PUC would be happy to follow up with you if you have any questions after the meeting. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I know you only had a few slides, and there was a lot of work that went into the Broadband for All action plan. So amazing, amazing work, great condensing it. Definitely a shout out to you and the team and everyone on this committee that has made that, that happen. And so I'd love to open it up to the council members to see if anyone would like to say anything in relation to all the hard work that went into this last year. All right. Yes, Miss Pepper.
Morning. Yeah, I just
wanted to say on behalf of CalSTA and Caltrans how much we appreciated working with Deputy Director Adams and his team on our action items. I think we see even those that may be marked complete by the end of the year are not ever going to actually be complete. We will be continuously looking at our processes and our policies for updating, but I think we have made a lot of progress over not just this past year, but the past few years. And I think it has really been I really want to acknowledge the CDT team, but also the Caltrans team who has put in a lot of work to make sure that we can complete these goals and to make it really a much more pleasant and efficient process for everyone involved. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, Ms. Snyder.
I think I'll just plus one on that. I have seen over the course of my time working with this council that tribal engagement has just completely, skyrocketed. And I think that a lot of the funding that's going to Indian country in California is a direct result of the work that you've been doing here. So just really appreciative and just want to commend you for the effort and the understanding and the effort to be understanding about the different needs and priorities of tribal communities.
Thank you. All right, I see no other comments. So at this point, we'll go ahead and jump to the next sub item underneath this particular agenda item, which will be Mark Monroe, Deputy Secretary Mark. Just to let you know, he is at the airport, so he is calling in remotely. So Mark, you are going to be providing a middle mile broadband initiative update.
Yes. Can everybody hear me all right? Or Leanna, can you hear me all right? All right, very good.
Yes.
All right. So good morning, everyone. Going to provide an update here on where we've been on the middle mile broadband initiative. I'm assuming we're all very familiar with SB 156 and the 2021 Budget Act that made $6 billion available for broadband, including the $3.25 billion that was made available for developing this network. I'll add to that the 2022 budget includes another $550 million. So the funding for the development of the network is up to $3.8 billion. CDT contracted last year with Golden State Net, Caltrans, and the Public Utilities Commission to for their various roles in developing and moving forward with the network. The PUC completed its public proceeding last August and September, where it was getting input on to help refine its estimate of where the needs are greatest in the state, where the unserved and underserved communities are. And based on some of the initial output from that, CDT had announced 18 initial projects last November that made up what was at the time estimated to be about 10% of the network. Really just targeted at looking at locations where it could be we could start learning. We could start identifying where some transportation projects might have fiber added to them, as well as some standalone places, and also as well as starting the process of looking for lease opportunities that might help facilitate or connect to those. We're going to go to the next slide here. You can see since then, this last year, CDT working with PUC and Golden State Net, we've finalized a 10,000-mile network map that we're targeting here to really reach those communities that were identified by Public Utilities Commission. Golden State Net has developed a preliminary map of existing infrastructure where we're going to be looking at where we might be able to lease to any areas that are going to make the most sense for the network in terms of optimizing the mix of leasing and building and timing of implementation. CDT signed 2 procurement contracts for 3,000 miles or more of fiber and related materials. And this is really key as we look at the expansion of fiber throughout the country, trying to make sure that we can address concerns and risks with supply chain. And so the way the procurements work is that we have 3,000 miles or more, and so that's and that kind of puts us in a good position with the industry and with suppliers to know that we will that we're going to be ordering from them, and that we'll have access to those as the rest of the country ramps up. And then CDT has also worked with Caltrans and state permitting agencies to streamline the permitting process. As everybody's aware of, SB 156 did provide for some CEQA streamlining, but there are other programmatic needs or other permitting needs that would need to be taken care of. And by using programmatic permits, we've been able to take the average time frame for a lot of this down from we think what would have been 30 months down to 17 months, down to the 10 or 11 month time frame, which really will help us meet those federal time frames for using the federal funds and for completing the network. And then in terms of one of the more recent things we've been working on as well is working with our federal partners. We estimated that roughly 30% of this network will go through federal lands. And so we've been trying to work through the Fast 41 process and with our the Bureau of Land Management, as well as using some other processes that Caltrans normally follows in working with those federal landowners to get permits and access to be able to build on those rights of way. We want to move to the next slide here in terms of what we're looking for. Currently, Caltrans has been working on those initial 18, doing the pre-construction work, as well as looking at other transportation projects where fiber might be added. I think initially the last estimate was that there will be 13 that might be started by the end of this current calendar year. And then one of them is part of the initial 18 is the State Route 67 down in San Diego, where we expect to announce the installation of the first fiber for the network tomorrow. Caltrans is going out to bid for construction contracts on more than half the network using job order contracting. And so we're finalizing that process, and we expect to start rolling out with some of those as early as later this week. CDT has just gone out to bid for an IRU for a range of components of the network, including IRUs, leases, joint build opportunities, as well as the purchase of existing infrastructure and co-location. And the idea there really is that we want to go out, see what is available out there in terms of what industry could help partner with us on, and make use of that, and see if we can share the costs and really help the funding go further. And then as we look at those construction contract bids and the IRU or the IRU joint build and purchase bids, as we get those in December, we expect to be able to make key decisions come this next December, January regarding regarding how to best optimize that network in terms of where we build, where we lease, and when we do both. So going to the next slide here, I think a week from Friday, we'll be holding our October MMAC meeting. This is a timeline that we put in front, we try to put in front of the MMAC members and the public every on our monthly MMAC meeting, just showing our progress there. You can see the two orange dates down at the bottom for October. This is where we're talking about the job order contracts and the RFP for the leases and construction or joint builds and purchases. And being able to get that information in December, you can see right below the years there where we have Caltrans working on that pre-construction process, and then that overlaps with the construction, so that we expect in 2023 to really start to see that construction roll out. As we're all aware, the federal funds have to be under contract for all of the construction and leases by the end of 2024, and the network has to be completed by December of 2026. So there's a kind of a high level review of where we are with the middle mile.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. I know you mentioned it on the slide, but as the Deputy Secretary Pepper had mentioned, tomorrow's a pretty big event. We've done this process in a breakneck speed and a lot of collaboration, partnership, and really leveraging the Dig Smart, existing highway projects and be able to lay our first fiber. So anything you wanted to say to the group? Just, we have quite a few local and Senate Assembly members that are joining us tomorrow. It's a pretty ceremonial, but also it marks kind of our flag in the ground that we are moving forward with this big project. So just want to give you an opportunity to you or any of the members to highlight that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really is a major step when for those of us who've been around and seen the speed of public works progress, projects like this, being able to actually start getting fiber in the ground a little over a year after the legislation was signed is really, I think, a good mark. The partnership we've had with, starting with the Public Utilities Commission and working with Golden State Net as well as Caltrans to look for these opportunities. The State Route 67 project is part of an 18-mile transportation improvement project that's been in the works for some time. And we really appreciate the initiative at the district level at Caltrans in looking for this opportunity once SB 156 was passed, really going out there and looking for these opportunities. I think it really shows the partnership that everybody's really been able to contribute to this, and I think bodes well for us, moving forward and meeting the federal deadlines and developing this network.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. I'd like to open up to any council members that have questions or comments. All right, I see none. Safe flight, and we'll see you again at our next report. Thanks, Mr. Monroe. The next agenda item is from Last Mile Programs, which is Commissioner Darcy Hauk from CPUC.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here today to provide a summary update of the Commission's Last Mile Broadband initiatives, highlighting the work we've completed in 2020 and what we're looking forward to in 2023. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the work that we completed in 2022 and a preview of what we're headed into over the next few months and into 2023. The primary focus of this year has been implementing the PUC's responsibilities under SB 156. And to that end, with regards to completed items, we adopted final program rules for the local agency technical assistance program. This program provides technical assistance to local and tribal governments. We completed the implementation setup for that program and have started accepting and approving applications. And I'll talk a little more about those applications and the recent awards that were issued earlier this week on the next slide. We also adopted a decision updating the rules for our California Advanced Services Fund programs, including the adoption account, consortia account, and public housing account. And finally, we adopted the final rules for the federal funding account, which will distribute $2 billion of the governor's $6 billion broadband initiative. With regards to items that are still in progress, we've recently released a staff proposal with proposed rules for our other significant new program authorized under SB 156, which is a loan loss reserve fund. We are also finalizing preparation of last mile funding areas for use in the federal funding account program. And our California Advanced Services Fund infrastructure account. For that program, we recently issued a proposed decision, which is pending. And this proposed decision, if adopted, will update the threshold delivered speed requirements and streamline the challenge process, among other improvements. And the main focus of those rules is to make them more user-friendly, so we can hopefully get this money out and get more projects moving. So finally, we also have begun to develop the Federal Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program. And that includes submitting our initial request for planning funds. And I think Rob Osborne, our Director of Communications, is going to talk more about that when he presents a little bit later. We will be opening application rounds for both the California Advanced Services Fund infrastructure account and the federal funding account. And finally, we will continue to work on developing the parameters of the BEAD program. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, we received at least 54 local agency technical assistance applications since the filing window opened on August 1st of this year. These applications have requested over $25 million of the total $50 million budgeted for the program. We recently approved our first set of LATA applications this week. On Monday, October 10th, we issued a media release, so I encourage you to look at that. 12 local agency technical assistance grants were awarded from 46 applications that we received in August. The funds were awarded to communities across California, from the Sierras to the North Coast, from the Central Valley to urban Los Angeles. And we anticipate additional awards to go out over the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for those announcements as well. And we continue to accept applications for this account on a rolling basis. It's also great to see the volume of participation that we've got from rural cities and counties, and we are especially pleased to see the focus on network design aid being requested, which is an indicator that applicants are far along in their planning. So we're also encouraged by the response to our adoption, consortia, and public housing application windows. With regards to the adoption account, in July, the PUC received 99 broadband adoption account applications, requesting a total of $28.5 million in support. And examples of projects from this group that have already been approved include, there was one proposed by the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, which will continue its Get Connected countywide outreach effort. And this effort encourages broadband adoption by increasing Communication Commission's Affordable Connectivity Program. And that will be providing digital training sessions that serve low-income, rural, and tribal communities. The Fresno Foundation will be providing culturally and linguistically appropriate digital skills training for up to 2,400 low-income residents in 8 mostly rural communities throughout the state. And finally, as a way to address generational poverty in Latino communities in Marin County, the Canal Alliance will be providing English as a second language digital literacy courses to 225 adult students, helping them acquire basic and more advanced digital literacy skills. 19 applications for grants totaling $1.4 million were submitted for our broadband public housing account, which is great to see. While this is a good start, we hope to increase the scope of the parties who can benefit from this program by issuing a staff proposal in the near future that will expand eligibility for the program to additional low-income communities. And just as a reminder, our decision earlier this year expanded eligibility to farm worker housing. So they now qualify for this program, and we hope to see more applications that can provide resources to underserved farm worker housing communities. We received 15 applications for our regional consortia account for a total request of over $10 million. 13 of these applications were from existing consortia bodies, with 2 applications from brand new consortia entities looking to represent underrepresented regions in California. Lastly, the picture that's here on the slide shows an event celebrating the kickoff of another of our CASF projects. This project is located in the San Gerardo Farm Worker Housing Cooperative, and the project evolved out of work initiated by the community members, elected officials, and the local consortia group, as well as Cruise IO Internet. This grant was awarded and greatly assisted migrant farm worker children living in the community that were unable to access the internet during COVID and the shelter in place. And now with having broadband, these students can access the internet to do homework, to help with other schoolwork, access telehealth services, and all of the other services that most of us take for granted. The event pictured was a celebration that highlighted the community that came together to get reliable broadband access to this cooperative. And there were representatives across the board from local, state and federal elected officials for the area, a large turnout for the community. And it was just great to see everybody come together to celebrate this important event. And I was very grateful and humbled to have been and honored to have been able to represent the PUC at this event, to meet with the community members and to see firsthand the impact that this project has had on the community. Next slide. So our focus for next year is what we have is, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we have a proposal with rules for our loan loss reserve fund, and we're accepting comments on that proposal right now. And we will be preparing a decision, which will be the subject of another round of comments before a vote by the commission. We also will be holding a public workshop to discuss the loan loss reserve program. So keep a lookout for that. The date has not been solidified yet, but we are in discussions with interested community members, and again are taking comments, and we'll have a public meeting. Staff will then, after the decision is adopted on the program, staff will be conducting implementation activities, which include finalizing application materials, preparing information materials, and then we'll open up our first round of applications. Similarly, we're working hard to finalize the FFA priority areas, which we hope to share soon, and then we'll be able to begin accepting applications for that program as well. And I know we've got lots of folks waiting for that to open, so we anticipate that happening as soon as we can possibly get that done. And lastly, we'll soon be able to turn from SB 156 programs to start up development of new programs under the BEAD umbrella. And the PUC will be responsible for developing the processes and proposals to incorporate public feedback into our BEAD 5-year action plan. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our communications director, Rob Osborne, will be discussing BEAD and our 5-year action plan in more detail a little bit later in the meeting. So thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on what we've been doing and what we hope to do next year. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Houck. And I would like to applaud CPUC. Because of SB 156, between middle mile, which is the backbone, but nothing really happens unless we have that last mile connectivity. And you guys have really been doing this at a rapid pace and making a big difference, obviously, from your update across the state. So amazing work, applaud your guys' efforts, and great. Thank you very much for your partnership. I'd like to open it up for any comments or council member questions of Commissioner Houck. All right, I see none. Thank you very much. The next sub item under Broadband for All is the Affordable Connectivity Program. We have President and CEO of CETF, Sunny McPeak.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Director. I do want to associate myself with all the positive comments and recognition of so much progress. So Deputy Secretary Pepper and Secretary Snyder, what Commissioner Houck just said, but I didn't want to keep commenting on all of that as we went along. Here is another one to add to it. So once we get all the infrastructure built, we have to get people online. So that's essentially what we're talking about with this report. Let's go to the next slide if we can. The Affordable Connectivity Program was a focus of the California Broadband Council at the first meeting in 2022 on March 2nd. The California Broadband Council, with all of the members, all of the state agencies, took a very groundbreaking stand, which is setting a goal to get online all ACP eligible households over the next 6 years. So a goal of 90% of ACP eligible households by the end of 2024 and 95% by 2027. The reason for that timeframe is that last, if you will, 5% between 90 and 95% is reaching the hardest to get online. A lot of progress has been made with the equity, with the Broadband for All plan pursuant to the governor's executive order. And on the complete list, most of this relates to item 16 in that action plan. But here's what's been completed. Working with the investor-owned utilities, which were reported on last meeting in July, the 4 IOUs together have reached 1.96 million customers that are CARE customers. CARE, of course, is the affordable program administered by the California Public Utilities Commission. So I think, Commissioner Houck, you can be very pleased by what the IOUs are doing in this regard. There's been a coordinated state agency effort with local partners, local and regional partners on ACP mobilization to meet that goal. The mobilizations pursuant to what the California Department of Education wanted as a timetable first took place in the month of August, with on August 27th, 25 events. We'll report a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then again here in October, that started with kicking off the whole effort with Digital Inclusion Week, National Digital Inclusion Week. And now we have Digital Citizenship Week in all of the schools. And on Saturday, October 22nd, there'll be again more in-person ACP enrollment events. The enrollment events have been requested and really were the brainchild of the California Department of Education, because obviously if we're trying to reach people who are not online and one has to apply online to the Federal Communications Commission to enroll, then we have to be able to provide backup for those who are not online today to do so. Our experience is that at least 20% of all households who are not online today need assistance. They need in-person assistance for one reason or another. It may be a language barrier, and maybe they don't have all of their documents together. And just to sort of put a pin in that, that means we still have about 750,000 households in California that we will need to reach in person to help enroll. And then the state agencies convened by the California Department of Technology, but participated in by all the state agencies, are now meeting monthly with the internet service providers. I think that's a huge step forward in collaboration, which has already borne fruit in what we're seeing with the ACP mobilization. So we have in progress working with those ISPs. We are continuing to mobilize for enrollment events. As I said, the next one is Saturday, October 22nd. And we are continuing to look at how to refine those strategies for outreach that also are going to inform the planning by the state for the digital equity plan and the BEAD plan. So what I think the state has done, and is really important to underscore, is be ahead of the curve, to take the opportunity in this last year to get experience, somewhat of a pilot, but real on the ground experience is going to inform the planning that is going to take place pursuant to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the plans that will be submitted to NTIA. And so our focus going forward is to leverage all of that experience in the planning, to continue to promote ACP, to identify the barriers as we gather that experience, and then develop recommendations for getting everybody online, and also obviously supported by deployment through the BEAD plan can close the digital divide through the incorporation of digital inclusion in everything we do and achieve digital equity. So on the next slide, let's talk about a little bit more detail where the Broadband Council is. As I mentioned, the 90% enrollment goal. To my knowledge, California is the first and right now still the only state with such an aggressive goal. So everyone is to be commended on the Broadband Council. Obviously, that's under the leadership of the governor and the administration, who have participated in that goal setting and established the environment with funding and with policy and then funding in order to get this done. This morning, Scott Adams was able to put in the new number that was just released this morning from the FCC. It's data as of October 10th, but it was released this morning of 1,723,664 households in California enrolled. That is 29% of our goal. It is, however, in the last week, a 25,000 household increase. And that's the indicator of all of the collective work of the state agencies that is beginning to get momentum. And that work is under the second column. Let's just look at what happened in August. So the California Department of Education distributed a letter from state public instructor, the state public instruction superintendent of public instruction. I will get SPI right. Tony Thurmond sent a letter to all districts and county offices of education. Now, the districts and the county offices are really working through their processes. And so this letter also was used by a number of other organizations, such as the California School Boards Association, community-based organizations, to say Superintendent Thurmond is urging everybody to get enrolled. I think the districts and the county offices, they're really gearing up for October, and then we're targeting February, by the way, for the next sort of mobilization in this fiscal year. It'll be in the next calendar year. The California State Association of Counties reached out to all 58 counties, have convened 3 briefings. Counties are important in that they do the certification on eligibility for Medi-Cal and CalFresh. Schools do the certification on National School Lunch Program. And all of the folks came together within what is called the Southern California Transformation Initiative, the Southern California Association of Governments, the San Diego Association of Governments. Those 2 MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, represent together 216 local jurisdictions and 60% of the state population. And so they have been coordinating a lot of effort with among the 7 counties and those county offices of education. On August 27th, there were 25 in-person enrollment events. More than 1,000 households showed up. 650 were able to be enrolled that day. The others are being followed up on because they needed some other kind of assistance or documentation. We were able to gather 260 surveys from participants, including those who received 183 Chromebooks. Those Chromebooks were provided by Frontier and Comcast throughout the state. And 64% of those who enrolled qualified on Medi-Cal, their Medi-Cal eligibility, which is a very important, again, experience and observation to draw from all of this, because that tells us how important the work the state agencies are doing on direct notification to those households who are eligible. The internet service providers not only provided the Chromebooks, they actually had volunteers on site and in some cases provided food. I want to underscore how important actually that was, because when you have 200 families who were standing in line in the morning before the ACP enrollment opened up, it was important that they get some coffee, some food, and had a place to wait while they would be enrolled by volunteers. So again, here's on the right side column, gearing up for October, what I think is, again, unprecedented anywhere in the nation. The California Department of Healthcare Services has made a commitment, and they are simply under their own effort notifying the 8 million households that are qualified for Medi-Cal. They annually do this notification. That notification started in October. It will run through December. So they were able to add to what they were already going to do without any expense, the notification on ACP. I think that little uptick in the last week in terms of increased enrollment to ACP is probably in part reflecting this. Our state librarian, Greg Lucas, has personally written, everybody knows that Greg is a great writer, a former reporter. He's written an op-ed and he personally edited it. So that's going to get published to try to engage more libraries throughout the state to be psyched for enrollment, to be able to distribute information. And then October 22nd, our targeted media. At this point, we have about 23 sites that have been identified and more are stepping up. When I say sites identified, these are on the ground partners. In some cases, counties, libraries, community-based organizations, schools who are opening up their doors, saying we'll host, we're matching up volunteers, grantees of CETF partners who other grantees that received funding from the CPUC as adoption grantees who are then coming to those sites to actually do the enrollment. So the last slide, let's move to that. We'll say our next steps. And so covered much of this, but the continuing work of the Department of Healthcare Services just needs to be applauded, underscored, appreciate everything that CSAC is doing with their counties. The county officers or the county leadership within CSAC, those counties are actually showing also very positive results because those officers are getting their counties involved. The following up on state the superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurman, reaching out again to encourage direct notification of national school launch students and parents. A number of higher education institutions are getting involved. So the fourth big category that is very discreet to contact for ACP enrollment are students who receive Pell Grants. That's an automatic eligibility category. We are really pleased to acknowledge that the Contra Costa Community College District literally sent notification 2 weeks ago to all Pell Grant recipients. And so we think that's a great model. We know that Evergreen Community College in San Jose is planning to do the same thing. And then libraries being able to take a leaf from State Librarian Lucas on his op-ed to expand will make a huge difference. And lastly, of course, we are recruiting those hosts for enrollment events, but are very, very pleased that the California Volunteers, Josh Friday and the commission, in response to Scott Adams and the work that we have done to engage them, are mobilizing their volunteers. So there's actually a matchup of California volunteers to these ACP enrollment events that is also very helpful. There was one of the 25 events in October that literally was done by volunteers. They just got the notice from the California volunteers, took the responsibility and did that on their own. They can San Leandro. And the last is that we're waiting for the Federal Communications Commission to actually release a notice of funding opportunity or availability on grants for promotion of ACP. And we'll coordinate with everyone, with the state agencies. We have a number of partners who want to work with together on an application to the FCC. The FCC did release yesterday their NOFA on the Digital Navigator pilot project. And we know there'll be California entities that want to participate in that. So with that slide, Madam Chair, I'll conclude my report on adoption, on the progress with the Broadband for All Action Plan and the mobilization around ACP.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. And we want to do a personal shout out and thank you to CETF for your powerful advocacy on behalf of broadband affordability and adoption. And I also want to recognize you as a broadband community warrior. I mean, you are out there at the front lines, making sure that people, when we do have the connectivity, know how to utilize it. So special kudos to you. Thank you very much for all your hard work. I'd like to
That's
open it
very
up.
kind. Thank you.
I'd like to open it up for any other comments or questions for Ms. McPeak. All right, we'll go ahead and go to the next agenda item. Thank you very much. We are going to start, the next agenda item is on the Investment Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act broadband programs. We're going to have Deputy Director Adams from CDT and also Rob Osborne from the CPUC. So I will go ahead and turn it over first to Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Director Bailey Cremens. Thank you, council members. Next slide, please. So as we had talked about earlier, Broadband for All is really expanding to leverage all available federal funding to support the aims of Broadband for All. And very pleased to report, as we have over the last several meetings this year, that the Department of Technology has applied for and expects to receive a digital equity planning grant from the NTIA sometime later this month. CDT will then have 1 year to develop the state digital equity plan, which is basically starts at the date of the award. CDT fully intends to take and conduct a 52-week planning process. I think, as we've all heard, there's a lot of work being done here at the Broadband Council and the state agency level, and we think it's critical to take the full amount of time to expand the table, to bring more partners to the table and enroll them in the conversation and the development of the digital equity plan and any recommendations or outcomes that are suggested. Do you want to note that the digital equity plan will focus on outcomes that are aligned with the state's broader priorities? It's really important to note that the opportunity we have through the digital equity planning process is to really tie together the state and the governor's equity initiative with the Broadband for All initiative, and really underscore how digital inclusion is a pathway to so many other outcomes. Do you want to report and underscore, as we have at past meetings, that the digital equity planning process will be done in very close coordination with the Public Utilities Commission, who is developing the BEAD 5-year action plan, and that at the end of the process, both plans will be woven together and will really shape how future federal funding through the IIJA programs will be shaped and targeted in the state of California. Next slide, please. Really, we had flashed this slide, but we wanted to share it again with the Broadband Council members to center us all on the opportunity that we have for digital equity. Is that digital equity is really focused on prioritizing investments for 8 covered populations, and those are the folks most impacted by the digital divide. We want to name them because they it's our commitment to draft a plan that addresses their needs. These are individuals in covered households, aging individuals, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers, members of a racial or ethnic minority group, and individuals who primarily reside in rural areas. Next slide. So the planning process that CDT will undertake in consultation with the Public Utilities Commission, with the Broadband Council, and with the larger public is really a 5-pronged strategy, and that is to develop a statewide planning group that is a base of broadband council members, but expands to other state agencies that have a close connection to the covered populations or subject matter expertise related to outcome areas that the plan will address. Develop outcome area working groups that would really do some significant heavy lifting to do stakeholder mapping, do an inventory of assets and programs that currently exist that can be leveraged and scaled to support the goals to do the third component is a digital equity survey, and actually a combination of digital equity surveys to assess barriers for the 8 covered populations. And then the fourth component is to get outside of Sacramento and to get outside of the virtual world and conduct multiple up to 20 local and regional outreach events throughout the state to engage communities and partners and stakeholders where they are to incorporate their lived experiences, but also their input and feedback into development of the plan. And then the fifth component is to conduct ongoing statewide public engagement through a number of means, through virtual Broadband for All summits. We're going to have a Broadband for All summit on October 24th, and it will be a kickoff for digital equity and BEAD planning to provide monthly email updates through our monthly broadband update, and then to continue to use the Broadband for All portal. It's a central convening place online where folks can find information on the program. And so I believe that concludes my slide, and I will hand it over to my colleague Rob Osborne at the PUC to talk about their approach on the BEAD program.
Thank you, Deputy Director Adams. So as I reported in the last Broadband Council meeting, we submitted the BEAD letter of intent on July 1st. On August 12th, we submitted the BEAD initial planning funds application, which is up to $5 million available for California to the NTIA, and I'll talk about that in a bit. After we submitted the application, there were several rounds of updates based on NTI feedback, and as of September 1st, the application moved to formal review. We continue to collaborate with Department of Technology, as Deputy Director Adams said, on the digital equity outreach planning, and I'll talk more about that in a bit as well. We've begun drafting a scope of work for the 5-year action plan activities, as well as beginning analysis on the FCC's serviceable location fabric, which we downloaded from the FCC site and plan on providing feedback to the FCC through the bulk fabric challenge process. We look forward in the coming year to be scoping the BEAD last mile grant program into a proceeding in the first or second quarter. We understand that the NTI plans to announce the state BEAD allocation sometime in between second and third quarter of next year. The CPC will be coordinating with CDT, Department of Technology's digital equity outreach that Deputy Director Adams mentioned earlier, to socialize and gather feedback on the 5-year action plan and the BEAD initial proposal. Next slide, please. So here's some more information on the initial planning funds application we submitted on August 12th. So we requested $5 million to fund the creation of the 5-year action plan, which is due 270 days after planning funds are received. Would fund the creation of the BEAD initial proposal, which is due 180 days after the BEAD allocation is announced. And again, the allocation we're expecting around sometime after May of next year. Would fund also the creation of the BEAD final proposal, which is due 365 days after the initial proposal is approved. In addition to that, the $5 million will help fund the planning and conducting of statewide outreach in coordination with Department of Technology, staffing to support the BEAD planning and last mile grant program, and then finally workforce related planning in coordination with Department of Technology, industry, labor, and education. We've had some initial meetings with the California Workforce Development Board, the Fiber Optic Association, which certifies training curricula for fiber optic technicians, and other stakeholders as well. Next slide, please. So for next steps, the NTIA Initial Planning Funds Award, as I said, is expected between now to mid-December. We'll expect to hear the announcement for that. For outreach activities, we'll be soliciting public feedback on the 5-year action plan in coordination with Department of Technology's digital equity outreach. And as I said earlier, the 5-year action plan itself is due 270 days from the Initial Planning Funds Award. And we expect the Federal Communications Broadband Map to be available sometime in May of next year, and this will be the basis for the BEAD allocation. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
Thank you, both to Mr. Adams and Mr. Osborne. Do any of the council members have questions or comments they'd like to make about the NTIA application, the BEAD program, digital equity? We'd love to hear from you. All right, I see no questions. Well, thank you very much for the very informative update. The last agenda item we have is a staff recommendation and adoption of what our calendar and schedule will look like and for 2023. As a reminder, the work plan will require a voice vote from the council members. So I will first go ahead and turn it over to Deputy Director Adams.
Are you going to have anything on receipt?
Bailey Crimmins and council members. Next slide, please. As you all can see that as the work of Broadband for All expands, the work that we all collectively have ahead will require continued and significant coordination, which occurs in large part here at the Broadband Council. So the staff is submitting a recommendation to the council members that our 2023 council focus. Number one, include the annual action plan review and revision process, where staff would engage with action item owners, the various agencies and their staffs to review action items, determine where legislation may have changed responsibilities or how ongoing efforts such as the digital equity and BEAD planning process can be leveraged and conducted to support the action items. The second piece is that we continue to use the Broadband Council as a forum to monitor all of the Broadband for All initiatives, that we continue to monitor the progress of the IIJ broadband programs, including the digital equity and BEAD planning. And lastly, that we continue to conduct quarterly meetings on the 4th Wednesdays of the month. And you can see the suggested dates for those meetings here. And that is the staff recommendation. Director Bailey Crimmins, I'm kicking it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. I would like to open it up for council member discussion. Is there any discussion on this, this agenda item? Yes, Mr. Jamison.
Scott, I know it probably seems rather straightforward, but I am curious about your first bullet in the staff recommendation on the annual action plan review and revision. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and what a revision might look like, as we have kind of a static yet dynamic action plan that exists in print?
Yeah, it's certainly. So as you would recall, that the initial version of the action plan that was completed in December of 2020 did state that the action plan would be annually reviewed and revised as needed. And so you may recall that last year at about this time, CDT had proposed a similar effort to review and revise the action plan, which we had done. And during the months of November and December, we had implemented a similar process where CDT went to each of the action item owners and got updates, any revision processes, and then we came back and presented those to the council in the first meeting of this year. So this is not a new recommendation. It's an extension of a process that was outlined in the action plan that was implemented last year and that we think is a fruitful effort going forward this year.
Wonderful. Thank you for the clarification and kind of the refresh.
Thank you. Ms. McPeak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Brent asked, I think, a really important question, and I didn't want to disappoint people without, weighing in on some of these issues. I was trying just to participate and observe in this meeting, but I did want to commend the discipline that is set forth. That was introduced a year ago, the systematic review each meeting, the format in which we're marching through what's in the Broadband for All Action Plan, learning, continuing to feed that back into what will be the next phases of work. And so Brent's question was a perfect setup to just commend you and say, I appreciate it. And also appreciate having the dates in advance so we can plan around them. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. Any other council member questions or comments before we do a motion to support? All right. Do we have a motion to support staff recommendation?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. McPeak. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second. Mr. Brisbella, please call a voice vote for all members.
All members in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move to public comment. Mr. Brisbella, will you please provide public comment?
Absolutely. In order to allow everyone who wishes to comment to have the ability to do so, we respectfully request one person per entity and 2 minutes per speaker. If you are a member of public attending via Zoom, please raise your Zoom hand or press *6, and we will go in the order of online public comment submissions before the meetings, Zoom hand raises, and we will loop back at the end for each. Sorry. We'll be posting, and with that, there are 3 public comments that were received before the meeting. I do see that one of the public comments made before the meeting is by someone who is in attendance. So I would love to open up the opportunity for Walter to have a time to speak his public comment if he so desires. Walter, you can unmute.
Yes, hi, good morning. Thanks for all of this. I was hoping that we could get a detailed written report on the action plan, the action steps from the action plan. All of this went by pretty quickly, and the slides are, of course, summary. So it would be good to be able to read it in more detail. The 2020 action plan I thought was very good, and I'd like to track along and see what all has happened because of it. So that was one. The other is I get the update phenomenon, but what is it that the money from NTIA for that planning process? It looked to me like it was a great deal of outreach and stakeholder planning, participation in planning. What do you anticipate would that revision of the action plan through that NTIA grant produce compared to what was in the 2020 plan?
I wanted to give just a quick opportunity. Mr. Adams, did you want to quickly respond to that, or do we want to go ahead and take that off and provide everyone a formal answer?
Well, I would say that technically, yes. Normally, public comment is on agendized items, and it's not a Q&A. However, really appreciate Mr. Seinbaum's question, and would encourage all folks who are at the meeting to attend the October 24th Broadband for All Summit and Digital Equity and BEAD kickoff. And we will have a deeper explanation of what the requirements and components of the digital equity planning process are. And that'll be an opportunity to learn more.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
I'll now move on to 2 public comments that were submitted prior to the meeting, in addition to Walter's. And I have noted that both Ronaldo and Derek Walker, who these submissions are from, are not in attendance and will read on their behalf. So Derek Walker made the public comment of what assurances are in place as to how projects will be assigned and awarded to existing high quality, established, bargained for craft to perform the work of building the fiber backbones and last legs into identified areas. The identified high quality work installation being performed by established, bargained for craft will ensure the implementation, maintenance, and effectiveness of the product, along with ensuring reliable, proper usage. Additionally, ensuring good middle-class income jobs to keep Los Angeles as one of the top cities to live, work, and raise families. The lowest bid cost being awarded to entities to perform this work does not ensure high quality and reliable working services, whereas there are established, properly trained craft familiar with this work, has the training, and is ready and in place to start immediately. The final public comment submitted was from Ronaldo Gill, and his comment is, I would like to receive and review a list of Latina organizations involved in the planning and mapping of broadband pathways through communities of color. The Latino population of California represents almost half of the population and suffers from a lack of digital access for education and business. How were communities selected for the first phase? That is the last of the submitted public comments prior to the meeting. With that, is there any Zoom hands or any participants as attendees wanting to make a public comment? And as a reminder, you can use the raise hand feature on the bottom toolbar of Zoom. Madam Chair, not seeing any more Zoom hands being raised. There's one final note that we will be posting the video and slides of today's meeting to the Broadband for All portal website within the next week. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to, before we close, to provide any council members who would make some additional comments before we close today's meeting. Are there any comments? Okay, I see none. So I want to thank the council members, presenters, and the attendees for their contributions today. I also want to express my gratitude for those who are working diligently to move things forward. We saw a lot of progress today through all the presentations. Your work is valued and you make great contributions on advancing broadband for all. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 25th. So please have a happy and safe holiday season for everyone. We look forward to seeing everyone then. And with that, we'll conclude the October 12th, 2022 California Broadband Council meeting.